Today, we are discussing an important topic that continues to generate strong interest among global currency watchers, especially within communities following the Iraqi dinar and other emerging market currencies. The central idea being discussed is the belief that the Iraqi dinar and the Vietnamese dong could eventually experience a future revaluation or strengthening event, and that investors and followers should begin planning ahead, responsibly rather than reacting emotionally, when major economic developments occur. Now, before we go deeper into this discussion, it is important to establish a balanced and realistic foundation. In the world of international currencies, exchange rates are influenced by many complex economic factors, including foreign reserves, oil revenues, inflation, government stability, trade performance, central bank policies, banking reforms, foreign investment, and geopolitical conditions. Currency movements do not happen overnight without underlying economic reasons, and any discussion about potential future changes must be viewed through a cautious and analytical lens. When people talk about the Iraqi dinar potentially gaining strength in the future, the conversation usually centers around Iraq's long-term economic rebuilding process. Iraq remains one of the world's major oil-producing nations, and over the last several years, the country has been attempting to modernize its banking system, improve financial transparency, expand digital payments, strengthen relationships with international financial institutions, and attract foreign investment into infrastructure and energy sectors. These developments matter because stable economic growth and stronger financial systems can improve confidence in a nation's currency over time. However, it is equally important to understand that economic transformation is usually gradual. Large-scale financial reforms require consistency, political coordination, institutional stability, and long-term investor confidence. The statement that the Iraqi dinar is just the beginning, not the end, reflects a broader belief held by some currency observers that global economic changes may continue reshaping emerging markets over the coming years. In practical terms, what this means is that many developing economies are trying to diversify away from older economic models and integrate more deeply into modern global financial systems. Iraq is one example of this transition. Because the country is actively pursuing banking reforms and international partnerships, while attempting to stabilize its economy after decades of conflict and financial disruption. At the same time, Vietnam has also attracted attention because of its rapidly expanding manufacturing economy, export growth, and increasing role in global supply chains. The Vietnamese dong is often discussed alongside other developing market currencies because Vietnam's economy has demonstrated strong industrial expansion and growing foreign investment participation over the past decade. However, it is extremely important to separate economic progress from speculative expectations. Economic growth alone does not automatically guarantee dramatic currency revaluations. Central banks carefully manage exchange rates based on broader national economic objectives. Sudden or extreme currency adjustments can create instability in exports, inflation, trade balances, and domestic financial markets. This is why most central banks prefer controlled and measured monetary policies rather than unpredictable currency swings. For Iraqi dinar followers, one of the most important factors to watch remains Iraq's ongoing banking modernization efforts. The Iraqi government and the Central Bank of Iraq have repeatedly emphasized reducing reliance on cash transactions, increasing transparency in currency transfers, strengthening anti-money laundering systems, and improving compliance with international banking standards. These reforms matter because international investors and financial institutions generally prefer working with economies that have transparent and modern banking infrastructure. Over time, successful reforms can improve confidence in Iraq's financial environment and potentially support broader economic stability. Another important element influencing Iraq's economic future is oil revenue management. Iraq's economy remains heavily dependent on oil exports, and fluctuations in global energy prices can significantly impact government revenues, infrastructure spending, and overall financial stability. When oil prices remain strong, Iraq has greater capacity to fund public projects, stabilize reserves, and invest in economic development. When oil prices weaken, financial pressure increases, and reform efforts can slow down. This connection between oil markets and Iraq's financial condition is one reason why analysts consistently monitor global energy trends when evaluating Iraq's long-term economic outlook. Sustainable economic diversification remains a major challenge for Iraq because the country continues working toward reducing excessive dependence on oil income alone. Now, from a short-term perspective, Iraqi dinar followers should understand that currency markets are influenced by both economic fundamentals and investor sentiment. News surrounding reforms, foreign investment agreements, regional stability, and banking modernization can influence optimism within currency communities. However, expectations should remain realistic. Financial markets often move more slowly and cautiously than social media discussions suggest. One of the healthiest approaches for followers of the Iraqi dinar is to focus less on emotional predictions and more on actual economic indicators. For example, progress in infrastructure development, growth in non-oil sectors, increased foreign direct investment, strong banking regulations, and improved trade partnerships are all measurable signs of economic progress. In recent years, Iraq has attempted to strengthen relationships with international partners in areas including energy, transportation, technology, and industrial development. These partnerships are significant because long-term foreign investment can contribute to job creation, infrastructure modernization, and broader economic confidence. Another issue that deserves attention is the modernization of Iraq's payment systems and financial technology sector. Digital banking initiatives and electronic payment expansion are becoming increasingly important across the global economy. Iraq has been gradually introducing reforms aimed at increasing financial inclusion and reducing dependence on cash-based transactions. This modernization effort may seem technical, but it is actually very important for the country's economic future. Modern banking systems improve transparency, efficiency, and investor confidence. They also help integrate national economies more effectively into international financial networks. For many Iraqi dinar followers, discussions about future currency value often become emotionally charged. That is why maintaining a balanced perspective is essential. Economic development is a long-term process that depends on sustained reform efforts, political coordination, security improvements, and global market conditions. At the same time, it is understandable why some investors remain interested in Iraq's future potential. Iraq possesses significant natural resources, a strategically important geographic location, and a relatively young population. If the country continues implementing reforms and improving stability, long-term economic growth opportunities could expand over time. But again, responsible analysis requires acknowledging both opportunities and risks. Iraq still faces challenges, including political tensions, infrastructure limitations, public sector dependency, corruption concerns, and regional geopolitical pressures. These factors can affect investor confidence and slow the pace of reforms. The statement encouraging people to plan ahead can actually be interpreted in a responsible and practical way. Rather than encouraging unrealistic expectations, planning ahead should mean preparing financially with discipline, caution, and realistic thinking. Any individual following speculative or emerging market investments should avoid emotional decision-making and should never rely on rumors or guarantees. One of the biggest mistakes in speculative financial communities is assuming that major financial events are guaranteed or imminent. History shows that currencies and economies evolve gradually over time through policy changes, economic growth, trade development, and institutional reform. Responsible financial planning always includes diversification, risk management, and realistic expectation. For Iraqi Dinar followers specifically, one constructive approach is focusing on education and awareness rather than hype. Understanding Iraq's economy, oil sector, banking reforms, trade relationship, and fiscal policies provides far more value than chasing sensational predictions. It is also worth discussing the psychological side of speculative markets. During periods of uncertainty or global economic change, many people search for opportunities that they believe could transform their financial future. This creates strong emotional momentum around narratives involving hidden wealth, sudden revaluations, or life-changing financial events. However, professional financial analysis must remain grounded in economic reality. While emerging economies can strengthen over time and currencies can adjust in value, responsible observers should avoid assuming dramatic outcomes without substantial supporting evidence. In Iraq's case, meaningful long-term economic success will likely depend on several interconnected factors. These include improving governance, expanding private sector growth, reducing unemployment, modernizing infrastructure, attracting foreign capital, improving electricity and transportation systems, and maintaining relative political stability. Additionally, global economic conditions will continue influencing Iraq's progress. International oil demand, regional trade partnerships, geopolitical developments, and global monetary policies all play a role in shaping Iraq's economic environment. For followers of the Vietnamese Dong, many of the same principles apply. Vietnam's economy has grown substantially due to manufacturing expansion, export strength, and foreign investment. However, exchange rate policies are managed carefully to support economic stability and export competitiveness. Strong economic growth does not necessarily translate into sudden currency appreciation. This broader perspective is important because it helps viewers understand the difference between economic optimism and speculative certainty. Countries can experience economic improvement without extreme currency events occurring. Financial systems are managed strategically, and central banks typically prioritize stability over sudden market disruption. One interesting trend worth monitoring globally is the gradual shift toward regional economic integration and modernization among emerging economies. Countries across Asia and the Middle East are increasingly investing in technology, infrastructure, logistics, renewable energy, and financial modernization. Iraq's participation in this broader transformation could create long-term opportunities if reforms continue successfully. Another factor that could influence Iraq's future is regional connectivity projects, infrastructure initiatives involving transportation corridors, energy partnerships, and trade routes may strengthen Iraq's role as a regional economic hub over time. Increased regional trade activity could contribute positively to long-term economic diversification efforts. At the same time, security and political consistency remain critical. Investors typically prefer stable environments where policies remain predictable and institutions operate effectively. Continued progress in governance and institutional reform would likely strengthen confidence in Iraq's economic future. Now, for those wondering what all of this means, in practical terms for Iraqi Dinar followers today, the answer is relatively straightforward. The most responsible approach is patience, education, and realistic expectations. Economic progress is often measured in years rather than days or weeks. Short-term developments may include continued banking reforms, new international agreements, infrastructure projects, energy investments, and modernization initiatives. These are meaningful indicators because they reflect ongoing attempts to strengthen Iraq's economy and financial systems. Long-term implications could involve broader economic diversification, increased private sector participation, stronger international financial integration, and potentially improved investor confidence if reforms continue successfully. But these outcomes depend on many variables and should not be treated as guaranteed. It is also important to recognize that financial markets are influenced by global uncertainty. Rising interest rates, inflation concerns, geopolitical conflicts, energy market volatility, and international trade disruptions can all affect emerging economies differently. Iraq is not isolated from these broader global forces. This is why experienced analysts usually focus on data, reforms, and economic indicators, rather than rumors or emotional narratives. Sustainable economic growth requires institutional credibility and long-term policy consistency. For viewers following Iraqi dinar developments closely, monitoring official announcements from Iraqi financial institutions, government economic plans, energy sector developments, and international partnerships may provide more meaningful insights than speculative online discussions. Another responsible point to emphasize is that no investment or currency-related decision should ever be based entirely on internet rumors, social media excitement, or emotional promises of guaranteed wealth. Financial decisions should always involve research, caution, and an understanding of risk. In the case of Iraq, there are certainly areas of genuine economic progress worth watching. Banking modernization, electronic payment expansion, infrastructure cooperation, and foreign investment discussions all represent meaningful developments. But progress should be viewed within the context of a long rebuilding process, rather than expectations of instant transformation. For many followers, the phrase, "Get ready for the next wave of things that are coming," reflects broader anticipation surrounding economic change in emerging markets. And while it is true that the global economy continues evolving rapidly, successful participation in financial opportunities usually comes from discipline, patience, and informed decision-making, rather than speculation alone. The future of the Iraqi dinar will ultimately depend on Iraq's economic performance, reform implementation, monetary policy decisions, regional stability, and international investor confidence. These are the real drivers that matter over time. As we move forward, viewers should continue paying attention to developments involving Iraq's energy sector, fiscal planning, banking reforms, foreign reserves, trade partnerships, and infrastructure projects. These areas provide a more realistic foundation for understanding Iraq's economic direction. At the same time, balanced analysis requires acknowledging uncertainty. No one can guarantee future currency values, timelines, or market outcomes with certainty. Responsible financial commentary should always prioritize facts, context, and measured expectations. What we can say is that Iraq remains a country with substantial economic potential, significant natural resources, and ongoing reform efforts. Whether those efforts ultimately translate into stronger, long-term economic performance will depend on execution, stability, and consistency over time. For Iraqi dinar followers, staying informed responsibly is far more valuable than reacting emotionally to every rumor or prediction circulating online. Knowledge, patience, and realistic thinking remain essential in any financial discussion. Thank you for watching today's update. If you enjoy responsible and factual coverage about the Iraqi dinar, Iraq's economy, and global financial developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss future updates. As always, this content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial, investment, or trading advice.